it affects you. 570 News presents Kitchener Today with your host, Brian Bourke.
My Paul and I do an evening show as well, 7 to 8 every night on 570 News, Monday to Friday, of course. They do give us a couple of free days so that we can recharge. Amongst the guests we are working on for tonight is Jeremy Hedges from the Canadian Shield, which was originally Inksmith. When I first talked to him, I think it was 3 weeks ago, about his plan to gather together a handful of 3D printers or laser cutters and try to create face shields for frontline workers. And since then, it has evolved to the point where the Canadian Shield, as the company is now known, has a 10 million unit contract, I believe, with the federal government to produce face shields. So really an excellent example in the region of the ability of some businesses to pivot. And by the way, the Canadian Shield is doing some hiring. They expect to have up to 300 staff fairly soon. So it's a really interesting story, and it does show you that even in times like this, what we've been living through for the past 6 weeks, there are some success stories out there, and that's good to remember. Speaking of success stories, it is a tough time to be a small business person, and it's good to have new resources. Frank Newman from Newman Human Resources here in Kitchener has been a guest of the program before and joins us again. Good afternoon, Frank.
Hi, Brian. How are you doing today?
I'm not so bad. There are some good things out there. I think that's important to remember.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing lots of support for small businesses, and I think people are being creative and supportive as we go through this.
So tell me about your involvement with the Business Health Council.
Yes, exactly. So the Business Health Council is a free website of information for small businesses, and it's really designed to help them through kind of three phases. It's kind of mobilize, adapt, and evolve. And the thought is that for many small businesses, they don't have access to senior or experienced consultants. So we put together this free website to basically allow small business to go on this, to think about different aspects of the business and basically take advantage of this free information. So we're doing this completely free of charge, and we've done this kind of out of a spirit of abundance because we believe that small business is the heart of the economy, and anything we can do to provide a little bit of support for that is worthwhile.
I find it interesting, the three-step program, and the first step in that is mobilization, which really takes place. Well, are we at the end of that mobilization period now, Frank, or coming to the end of it?
Well, I think we're probably three-quarters of the way through. So the idea behind Mobilize is that as the immediate impact of business is felt, so companies are looking at layoffs, or they're looking at restructuring their marketing, or they're looking at how to reach out to their customers differently and react. So many businesses are in that state now, but at the same time, we're still learning how to mobilize. We're still learning how to keep social distance. We're now dealing with some of the impact of mobilization in terms of, how do you keep employees safe at work? How do you make sure that they're comfortable coming into work? So I think the mobilization is pretty much done, but as I say, there's going to be some impacts of that over the next few weeks and months.
Well, and I would think that mobilization is impacted every time there's new information, which in this current situation is like every 10 minutes.
Exactly. And a lot of my clients have been struggling just to keep up with information. The government has been wonderful with the various programs, but one of the frustrations for business is, how do I know what's current? How do I keep going on this stuff? And where do I get resources for information? So making sure you've got the right information in a rapidly changing sea of change is hard to find sometimes.
Well, it's difficult for all of us to keep up with the information because it just comes in absolute waves. The second phase of this, and I'll go through each of the three phases, is adapt. And that's where I look at it. This is where we are right now. The crisis is underway. The business environment is changing. And I guess that's the time that maybe for small business owners, they're looking at this and saying, okay, we got through these few weeks, but we've got to make some changes in order to survive.
Exactly. exactly. Yeah, one small example is, people can't get their hair cut at the moment. And so there's a lot of, beautiful salons that are empty. The chairs are vacant right now. And so what one of them has done is they also sell hair products. And so they have adapted their business to create an online website. And they're, recouping a lot of their money by selling hair products, which people still need and actually desperately need to look after their hair right now. So we're seeing, a lot of that type of adaptation take place. Another organization I know has had to pull all their sales reps, and so they're adapting to more online services. They're also reaching out to customers by phone. So we're seeing, this is really where a lot of creativity comes, because it's kind of spur of the moment. And then how do we leverage that for the next few months to keep people safe?
Well, we've seen that in companies like I mentioned before, Inksmith, which has pivoted and now starts to produce face shields. We've seen it in distilleries and breweries in the region, who all of a sudden said, okay, let's flip out and go do some hand sanitizer. So that's kind of the adaptation place. Not everybody can do that, but I'm assuming almost every business can look at what they've done in the past, what lies ahead for them in the future, and make some level of adaptation.
Yeah, this is really a time to be thinking out of the box. It's looking at, other methods of distributing products, reaching out to customers. We've seen it even in the workplace. I mean, we've got more people working from home now. And suddenly organizations are having to deal with remote employees where they never had before. So they're putting in policies to support that. They're encouraging people to communicate online more. We're just seeing that level of creativity. So it's actually not a time for despair. It's really a time for optimism and saying, well, how can we make this work? I've got another company similar to Canadian Shield. They make scuba equipment, and they have snorkel masks, so they've adapted those to become respirators. So again, there are opportunities out there, and it's really a question of just challenging your staff and your leaders to think about that.
Stage 1 is mobilize, stage 2 is adapt, and those two, there's plenty of information on businesshealthcouncil.ca, which is the name of the website. The third phase of that is evolve, and I find that interesting. That area hasn't been completed yet, has it?
No, what we're doing is we actually have a countdown to evolve, and we've got a clock on the website, so we have 21 days, 23 days, 21 hours to evolve. And the thinking is that as we've gone through this adaptation phase, we're going to start to put some of those things into practice. So, for example, the organizations that have pulled back on the sales reps are now going to start to, perhaps hire different types of people to do the work. And what they'll do is they'll start to solidify some of the adaptation methods that people have put into place. The other thing we're seeing as part of this is social media has just increased. I've got people who laid off their social media staff now bringing them back because they recognize that that'll be part of the evolution. And so building those social media platforms is going to be key for their business.
And this is, the interesting part of adaptation and then evolving is I've wondered, to several business people lately, as you mentioned, we've had to move people into remote locations to go to work from home, that kind of thing. And those employees may come back to you and say, you know what, I kind of like this. So now you have to have some discussion about how to adapt your business model to something that you wouldn't even have believed would have been in place, just a month and a half ago.
Absolutely, Brian. And we've got, and what companies will have to do is they'll have to take some learnings from working from home, and they'll want to make that into some policies so they can make it consistent. But I think you're right. We've now created expectations for people to work at home, and it's going to be hard to put that genie back in the bottle. And we're going to start to see some spill-offs from that, even in terms of commercial real estate, because suddenly you may not need to have 100% of your staff in the office all the time. So maybe you only have to have an office that fits 70% of your people. So there'll be some ramifications from this over the coming weeks for sure.
There's an awful lot of pressure on small businesses from those that employ 30 or 40 or 50 people to even those sole entrepreneurships, and having the ability to put together a plan like this is I kind of think invaluable because there is no plan for this. At least we didn't have one before.
No, that's exactly right. And so what we tried to do with the website is to give people information, whether it's about sales, finance, IT, HR, or operations. So, and it basically asks a series of questions and gives them a series of steps so they can logically look at their business through another lens. And, this is the result of, most of the people working on this website have probably got 40, 50 years of business experience. So again, they get the benefit of this. And again, it's a good way to just second guess your business, and most business owners are pretty creative, but if you've got a bit of a formula, it just helps to go through some steps there.
Well, and I know that everybody keeps saying the same thing, that these are unprecedented times and then they're uncharted waters, but there have been lots of changes in the world in the past 20 years or so that have made small business have to make some adaptations. All we have to do is take a look at, the wonder that is the internet and see how much that changed business to know that there have been occasions where we've had to make some pretty severe changes.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're right. We've had lots of experience doing this. We're going to see, great examples. I mean, there's going to be some great case studies of organizations, whether it's the Canadian Shield Company or even the restaurants now that are putting in, delivery services. So there's going to be a lot of successful adaptations here. And so there is that sense of optimism, and people can grab onto that and say, we're going to have a stronger economy coming through it. It'll also be more robust. I think we're going to see something what I call the elastic workforce. So we're going to see companies that are hiring more contract workers, but again, it'll give people freedom to work for different companies. And I often encourage my personal clients to say, you want to make sure you're employable, not just employed. So people will look at their own personal career strategies and make decisions to make sure that they can survive in case something happens like this again.
Then that's an interesting, bigger question, Frank, is when this is all over, does everybody take a step back and go, we may have to deal with this again. We hope we don't, but we may. All things are possible. And do we need to sit down and go, what do we need to do to get past this the next time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, certainly, from a company basis, companies will need to look at their disaster recovery plan. What have we learned from this? Individuals will look at probably their financial plan and say, do I have a nest egg of something to fall back on? And then I think for ourselves in the workforce, we're going to be looking at our career pathways and say, well, what can I do to prevent this from happening? And, thinking one step beyond that, our kids in high school and universities, how do they craft robust career plans so they have the flexibility to spin and turn as this change takes place?
Frank, I appreciate your time today.
Very good. It's my pleasure, Brian.
And I know that you've had a couple of years in the whole human resources field. This must have been a busy time the last few weeks because there's an awful lot of HR questions out there.
It's been an exciting time in a way, but nobody's been through this before. And I think, what I'm reassured by is a lot of businesses are thinking very carefully about their people because that's the key success for their business. And so, thinking about their culture, and I say to them, people will remember how they've been treated now. So people have long memories, they work in companies, and so if you're not treating your people well now, quite frankly, they will remember it. And similarly, if you treat them really well, they will appreciate it.
Well, and like I've said this several times, that a situation like this really exposes the cracks in not only, I guess, all of us as an individual, but it exposes some cracks in the businesses too, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. If anything wasn't working before this happened, it's clearly not working now. And we're also seeing, opportunities for leaders as well. I've been totally impressed by many of my clients who have stepped up to the plate and said, we're going to do this for our employees. I've got, managers and owners working around the clock to keep their employees involved, keeping them employed. So I think there are challenges here, but I think the smart people will say this is a challenge, and it's no different from, I have a Winston Churchill mug that I use that says, never give up, never give up, never give up. And I think that's the attitude we have to take these days.
You're also dating yourself a little bit, just saying.
Well, it's not a real mug, but anyway.
It's not actually Winston Churchill's mug.
I sure hope not.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Brian. Bye-bye.
Frank Newman from Newman Human Resources. If you are somebody who is in the small business space, and actually, even if you just want to get an understanding of it, it's businesshealthcouncil.ca. It's well worth going to have a look. It's very readable, it's very accessible, and it's very interesting as we kind of go into this new period. As we said, that first period is mobilization, which is when everything hits. That's what we've been through for the last 4 or 5 weeks. And now we're kind of in a little bit of a mishmash between mobilization and adaptation. Some places will be in other spots, and you start to look forward and say, well, we are sooner or later going to come out of this, so how do we adapt to survive this part and then move into the next part, and then the evolution evolve at the very end where you decide, okay, this is how we're going to do this from now on. And I think we will see some things that might be really interesting. For example, we talked over the past year or so now and then about the incidence of ghost kitchens. So it's just a place where you cook stuff and then the food's delivered. It's taken hold in some bigger cities. Hasn't really taken as much hold in cities like this. But maybe that's an evolution that some restaurants may look at and say, you know what? Maybe we can do just as well by operating this way without the seating systems. I think that's a change that we might well see. I think we'll see a change to delivery services because consumers are going to demand something at a different level. So there's a lot of change that's coming.